corporate America. I come from a background of HR and corporate leadership and career coaching, but more recently went through my own sort of traumatic experience in the workplace, which led me to becoming trauma informed. And now I help other professionals who are just struggling at work and want to have a healthier relationship.
So, first question for you, Katie, and this might be a big one because I know it's a big one for me. Why are people so traumatized at work?
Well, yeah, great question. Let's talk about what trauma is, as I'm sure you know, but how I think of it is trauma is not the event. It is what happens when we experience a distressing situation or event that is difficult to cope with. Our system is overwhelmed. We don't know how to cope. It creates a wound. That is trauma. So now let's think about work. Think of all the things that happen in a workplace that are difficult to cope with. The power dynamics, the the system itself and what it is, the conditioning that we have for what work is supposed to be, and what it says about us as a person and our identity, what our job and career does. Just all of the things that can happen there. And that's just the normal stuff. And we're not even talking about hostile work environment, discrimination, harassment, all the really terrible and illegal things that happen to people every day. And I work as an HR consultant, so I work with a lot of different companies, and it is rampant. It is everywhere.
It's scary, to say the least.
Yeah, it is really scary, and that so I'm very appreciative to come on here and just talk to you about it because I think that's what we need to start doing is we need to just start talking about it more. Employers and systems are not motivated to talk about it. They are the ones that actually want us to be quiet. And so we do have to just start talking about it that this is really happening to a lot of people.
I started working when I want to say 16. Paper route, like a lot of kids, right? You're delivering
Mhm.
things. As I got into, let's say, a career job. So I used to work in retail while I was in school. Once I graduated school, that's where I found a job that I wanted to do, and I've been there for a number of years now. As I've gotten older, I became more aware of what was going on when it came to, let's say, traumatic experiences in the workplace. If I look back in my 20s, it was just, we're all cool, we're all earning some money, so we can go do cool 20-year-old things, right?
Mhm.
I know for me, I was probably spending all my money on women because there's no other way for them to like me, right?
Nice.
But I wonder then how many people stay in traumatic or let's say hostile work environments because they've reached a certain age and maybe they think that they can't start over. Is that a thing?
I think that's absolutely a thing. I mean, they think that they can't start over or they just don't want to start over. Like we spend decades, a lot of times working for one company or building our career and we get to the spot and a lot of people just aren't really happy doing that anymore. But where do you go? Because you're not in your 20s anymore. You're not just doing it for drinking money. You have a mortgage, you have a family to take care of, you have financial responsibilities. And so walking away is not always easy. And a lot of us just don't even have capacity to even think about that or even wonder, well, what would I even do?
And then they'll stay stuck in there, then they'll bring that drama, trauma, and chaos home.
Absolutely, it gets stuck in our body. We can't always separate what we go through in our 9 to 5s, especially when we're just like constantly taking things on. I've been thinking a lot about lately about what I'm calling high absorption roles, which are roles where you are required to really manage the emotions, urgency, or dysfunction of other people or systems without enough time, resources, or support to recover. So, customer service jobs, healthcare, childcare, any leadership position, social services, even regardless of industry, anytime you work for a toxic or abusive boss, it's going to be your job to manage their emotions. It's just happening everywhere. And so we're constantly just taking on the weight of all of this responsibility that we have in our job, which leads us to our life and how we be responsible in our life. And we just don't know how to get out of it. And we're not recovering.
Why do you think so many people are struggling with that role where they feel that they have to stay in that type of environment?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, we kind of already talked about, like, I don't know where to go and I don't know what I would do instead, where I can still make the same amount of money because we become dependent on our salaries. And so people think if I make 100 grand here, where else am I going to go and make 100 grand? And they think about it sort of like laterally like that. And so already they feel really limited in their options. And then other times it's like, I like my job, but this company is toxic or this company is killing my soul. But I really like the job. And I worked really hard for this job. I went to school for a long time. I climbed the ladder. I did all the things I was supposed to do. And now I'm here. And I just want to be happy. I just want all this bullshit to stop. But it doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't stop. I used to date someone and she gave up so much for her career, her job. Um, she spent so many years doing it and she lost her family, her home, and the relationship. When she lost all of that because it was having this negative impact on her life and her health, which you've probably seen that a lot of people get impacted from a health perspective in regards to it, she ultimately had to change jobs because her body was saying that, hey, you need to make a change. You know, when it whispers, we ignore it, but when it shouts, we can't ignore the shouting anymore. She tried to rebuild all of that, and she is entering her 50s now. She can't rebuild it.
Wow.
And it's a shame to see because even though it was her choice to make these decisions, a part of me still feels kind of bad because when you look back and you think that this person lost so much for a job that wouldn't even sacrifice half of that for her. Um, when you see things like that, how can someone recover from that type of devastation in their life, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's what I help people with. So you asked me earlier where people can find me. My business is branded Work Is Not Family. So my website is workisnotfamily.com. And it's for the exact reason that you just said. We give and give and give. And this goes way back through our childhood. And again, I always come back, I use the word conditioned. It could be your conditioning, it could be a trauma response, but somewhere along the line, you learned to do these things, to overgive, to be very responsible, to push through, to be the doer, to get things done, push, 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 go, go, go. You learned somewhere along the lines that that would help you feel valued, feel lovable, get your needs met. And so we bring that into work and we bring that into a system where we are told it's like a family here. We are your work family. So, what does that do? That implies loyalty, that implies devotion, that encourages us to blur those boundaries. So, we have all of that conditioning. And then we go into a system that takes advantage of that conditioning and we get sucked in. We get sucked in. So part of the work that I do with people is talking about what actually is work itself, because it is not a family. When I think of work, how I think about it is you agree to do a series of tasks, which are hopefully on your job description. And not even everybody doesn't even have job descriptions, but you should have a job description that says these are the things you are agreeing to do. And then your employer agrees to pay you for doing those things. And like that's it. That's the agreement. I really look at work now as a contract and as an agreement. Either party can end the contract at any time. And that's it. It's not a family. And so that's part of it for me is really even just reframing how we even look at work and how we show up in these systems.
Is that hard for people to adopt that type of view?
Yes. At first, like I'm working with someone right now and I've been with her for a while now, so she's really starting to open her eyes. And then she texted me the other day and she said, I came into work this morning and my coworker got laid off. And that woman works very hard. That woman lost all of her boundaries. That woman worked nights and weekends, and they laid her off because she wasn't a good fit. And my client said to me, oh, that just reinforces it. Work is a contract, it's not a family.
When I realized that work was just that, where it's an agreement between two people to perform tasks and you will get compensated for those tasks, everyone around me thought I was weird.
Okay, tell me about that.
Right? Because the reason why I share that is because I was such a hardworking, high performing employee where if I take it a step back, I grew up poor. So I was like, this is my opportunity to earn a little bit of money and have things, right? Um, I got the awards. I got the employee of the year. I got the salary. And then one day I was like, is that it? Is
Mm,
there more to life? And I was like, okay, let me work hard because as you mentioned, right, some of us are taught. So I worked hard and I told someone this at the time. I worked harder than the year I won the employee of the year award. I didn't get the same raise, I didn't get the award. I was like, oh, so
hmm
it's not necessarily the hard work. It's everything else. From that day, everything changed. I realized I need to be more balanced because that same year, my manager at the time, he would work and work and work. And he was kind of like an inspiration because I saw all the attention and validation he was getting. He worked so often that he missed his wife giving birth to their only child. People thought he was crazy, but he's like, no, but look at all the success I had. A year or so later, he got diabetes. He gave and gave and gave, and he missed the birth of his child. And not shortly afterwards, he was diabetic. I remember when he shared that story with me, he was crying. He's like, Turin, I think I failed. And at that point, I was thinking he's going to talk about his family. He's like, now I can't perform the same way. I'm like, perform the same way.
Yeah.
You want to be here for your son. You want to be here for your wife. And he's like, oh my God, I wasn't even thinking. In his mind, that's what he was thinking. But the words came out, he was still talking about work. I changed and he changed. So when you hear things like that, that people, and you just mentioned that people give so much, and then ultimately they start to lose themselves. Is that something that you see and help with often?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, what you're really talking about is having your identity really tied into your job. And so he was probably, thinking about his family because he's providing for his family because he has this successful job. So in having this successful job, I'm taking care of my family without just thinking, we'll just be with the family, screw the job type of thing. So, what I've noticed from talking to people is that a lot of it does have to do with how much your identity is tied to your job. I work with a lot of people after they get laid off. I worked with a lot of people in 2025 who had just lost their job. Some had been with a company for 30, 40 years. Their identity was so wrapped up and not even just that industry or their career, but being an employee for that specific company that when that was ripped away from them, they didn't know who they were. The flip side of that is sometimes that happens while you still work there. You give so much and you compromise your values so much and you abandon yourself so much that you might get to keep your job, but you lose who you are.
How does someone then try to rebuild or rediscover that identity?
The work that I do with people is really about building internal authority again. So it is part of seeing work as a contract, not a family, but it's really also about tapping into your own internal cues. So I do a lot of nervous system education with people based on the polyvagal theory, figuring out what your nervous system is telling you. Using some somatic practices. I'll teach a lot of people how to use somatic practices in the workplace to regulate in sort of real time. But ultimately, how I think about it is you got to figure out what's coming up for you. If it's about the past and not necessarily about what's happening at work, and what do you need to do to stop abandoning yourself? Maybe that is disconnecting your identity from your job. For some people, it's stop, you have to stop caring what other people think. You have to be okay with being judged. You have to be okay with failing. All of these things, we all have our own thing. It's the one thing we don't want to do. We've literally spent our entire lives avoiding doing this thing. That's your thing. That's what you got to figure out how to do.
I see that being tough because let's say up until the age of 40, you probably spent the majority of your life working in a type of job. If you retire at 65, you probably spent a good 3/4 of your life in a job. And now if you were to go to someone, let's say like the boomers who were culturally conditioned, for lack of a better word, to work and work and work, for them to try to find themselves again or who they are, I can see that being a struggle. Does age play a factor in the type of work that you do?
It's a great question. I think so. There's definitely some generational stuff there. A lot of the boomers that I know have a very hard time being vulnerable. And what we're really talking about is healing. You can't heal without being vulnerable. You can't heal without being willing to take a hard look at your life and accept the impact that the experiences you've had have had on you. Now, that's not all boomers, of course, just, everyone's different. And where does that come from? They were taught to be like that. Where I kind of work with the most people are elder millennials or some Xers, where you're old enough that you've had enough life experiences that you've experienced some trauma. You've gotten knocked on your butt a few times. And yet you're at this point where you're thinking like, oh, like I'm 45, like I'm 45. Like there's like I'm getting closer to death than I am to my birth. Like there's not that much time left. Like I want to live the rest of my life with peace in my body. And so in order for me to do that, I really had to learn how to heal from the first half of my life. Does that make sense? How do you feel about that?
I feel that let me answer that question. There's more years behind us and in front of us. Yes, 100%. Um, I think that you're absolutely right. That I always quote myself as saying that I want to be balanced. And people will ask me, and I share this, that work will make you feel imbalanced in the most strange ways, right? I had a bad boss years ago, many, many years ago. And if I would look at that boss and what I tolerated and compare that to my relationships, there's no way I would let another woman speak to me that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the things that we accept at work, we wouldn't accept from our family, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, our husbands, our wives. And it's a strange dynamic. And what I truly believe is that you're right in regards to you want to have peace. And peace in general doesn't come from working 10, 12, 14, 16 hours. Because if you were to break it down, you have 24 hours in the day, one third of that is for work alone. 8 hours, right? Forget if you're working overtime. If the travel hour there, hour back, that's 10 hours. And of that 14 hours, what are you doing for you? And that's where I define balance, right? I don't, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one. I'm not saying give yourself 10 hours because you gave work 10 hours, but you can give yourself 50%,
Mhm.
right? And I don't see people doing that. I think people just get caught up in thinking, well, I have this lifestyle, I have to maintain it, but you're doing it for who? And I think sometimes we get caught up in trying to build something for other people to appreciate, which gives us value instead of finding value within. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then I think from a nervous system perspective, because we are constantly absorbing emotions, urgency, dysfunction in the workplace, and we are not recovering from that. We don't have enough time to recover from that, that our nervous system is dysregulated a lot. So what I see a lot of the times is people during the workday are in this sympathetic nervous system state. Most people think of it as fight or flight, this abundance of energy, anxious, frustrated, angry, all of these emotions that come with all this energy. And our bodies aren't meant to stay in that state forever. So when we get out of work, we shut down. We go numb, we go disconnected. There's a real lack of energy. And a lot of people are just doing that pattern, I mean, for decades. So they get out of work, they don't have energy to do anything else. Their system has actually shut them down because the system needs a break.
There's a woman I worked with. She gave and gave and gave to her job, and when she would get home, she would just sleep. And then I
Yeah.
asked her, I was like, "How do you think your partner views you?" She's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, you're giving all this energy to your point, to your job, and then when you come home, you don't have any energy for your family, for the children, for your partner, no one." There's a reason why they make the joke about work husband, work wife, because you're giving to your job and you're not giving to your family. And she's like, "Well, I need the money to do what?" Right? Like, I think sometimes these are questions that some people don't ask themselves because they literally just look at work as a means to an end. Because I turned around and asked her, I was like, "Do you see a life without work?" She was like, "No." So I was like, "So you don't even plan to retire? You plan to work until you die? No trips with the families, no celebration with the kids, nothing." She's like, "Well, they'll understand." Well, you're making that decision for them. If you were to ask your children and your family and your husband and whomever, if they rather reduce the lifestyle a little bit and have more time with you, do you think that they would want you to work more or spend more time with you? She's like, "Of course they would want to be with me." So it's like, that's the way you have to look at it, right? I think sometimes we just sacrifice too much for things that aren't really that important.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times we don't even really know that we're doing it and we don't know how to change. So for my story, I had left corporate America, this company I worked at for 15 years. I went to this smaller company, 25 people, no HR department. My boss loved me. Surprise, surprise. He loved me. My boss has always loved me. I thought it was going to be a normal boss love. It quickly turned into very overt favoritism. That made me very uncomfortable. Turns out he had done this to multiple other female employees who had worked there. And whenever they brought it up and complained, they were fired. So, in this situation, I was trying to handle it. I was telling myself, like, you got this, you can deal with this. During that time, I was bringing it home with me. It did hurt my relationship. Well, I want to say it hurt my relationship with my husband. My husband's amazing, he's very supportive, but it was difficult because this job overtook my whole life. I have two children. I wasn't super present with them during this time because the amount of stress that this put on me in the workplace, because there was also a lot of manipulation going on in the background and there was a lot of gaslighting, and I didn't know what was going on. And when it did finally get reported to the CEO of the company, the way that he addressed it triggered some old trauma. So I had been sexually assaulted 20 years before by a coworker, and I went to the police and they sent me away without even taking a statement. And so now here I was getting really emotionally abused by my boss, a male in a position of power. And when I went to the CEO, who's supposed to be the person to protect me, I was also betrayed. And my body made that connection, and my body had a very intense physical reaction where after I felt physically damaged. I felt like I had an open wound in my chest. And I worked there for 9 more months after that. And I cried every day. I didn't sleep. I had stomach issues. Again, very disconnected from my kids, very disconnected from my husband, because I was literally just trying to survive and breathe. Sometimes that's what's going on. And it's not just a reframe, it's that we have past traumas that are coming up and are impacting us because of the system, because of the power dynamics, because we rely on it for money. And it's really impacting us in a way that is very harmful.
How were you able to get through that 9-month period?
Was I able to, or how was I able to?
How were you able to?
Because I just kept breathing. Like, I don't know, like humans are amazing. We're amazing. The human body is amazing. I just lived my life every day, but I was not me. Even the me you're meeting right now, this girl was gone. She was gone for a long time. It was only once I left that workplace, and then once I learned about trauma in the nervous system, and I learned about the science behind what was happening in my body, all that time it felt like my body was attacking me. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I think my way out of this? It felt like my body was attacking me. And when I learned about trauma, I was like, oh, my body was trying to save me. Those signals that you said that were quiet at first and got louder and louder and louder, they got so loud that I had a physical breakdown because my body was trying to save me, because our bodies love us. Oh, that allowed me to release some of that shame, have some compassion for myself, have compassion for other people. And that was really when I was able to start looking forward. So I bring that up talking about your friend that you were talking about. Sometimes it is like, hey, snap out of it. What are you thinking? And sometimes it's just much deeper than that.
Yes, I think sometimes money will blind us. Basic needs, right? Food and shelter. So
Mhm.
we'll stay in a damaging environment because maybe the money is so good and allows us to maintain a certain lifestyle that we got used to. And I think sometimes, and I've seen this, and I'll get your point, I've seen this maybe impact women a little bit differently than men, is that what are my social circles going to think of me if I no longer am tied to this job that brings me a certain level of prestige? Whereas some men maybe would isolate and they'll try to like hide it because they don't want to be judged until they get something else. But I think maybe in general, men and women do handle it a little bit differently. But overall, it's still sometimes we think how we're going to be viewed by other people instead of saying, wait a minute, my life, my family, my health is being impacted. How do you see people being impacted in different ways when it comes to these jobs and they're looking to leave, but something is keeping them there?
I think it's like you said, it's impacting their bodies. So we have all of these physical symptoms going on where you're either in this fight or flight, anxious, which just feels terrible. This just abundance of energy, just sick to your stomach. Your body is putting all of its resources to preparing you to fight or get away from a threat, not the things that it doesn't need, like sleep and digesting your sandwich and things like that. So we can have all of these physical sensations. When our nervous system switches into that mode, we also lose access to our prefrontal cortex, which is where our judgment, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making skills. We need that part of our brain to be able to do those things. And we need to do those things for our job. But we become so dysregulated, we don't even have access to that. We go into the limbic system, our emotional brain, and we start operating from our emotional brain. And so then what are like the cognitive effects of that? If you put this all together, difficulty concentrating, brain fog, just really we start to lose ourselves. And that's the danger. When you don't recognize yourself anymore, when you don't trust your own judgment, when you don't feel safe in your own skin, that's trauma. That for me, that was the low point of like I've always been a confident person. I've always had a strong sense of self, and I couldn't even tell you if the sky was blue or not. And that happened because of my job. Also because of my lived experiences that impacted that. But that's why I started this business too, because it's just a contract. Like that shouldn't be happening. I do this thing for you, you give me money. And yet we put all of this other stuff around it. We build all these narratives, we tell all these stories, and then we show up and we hand over our hearts and our souls eh, to systems that don't deserve it. And then we are the ones that get crushed. They don't.
But Terrain, Katie, these are my family, and if I don't hang out with them, I don't have anyone else to spend time with.
Does your family put you on a pip when they don't like how you're acting at dinner?
Only as a child, not as an adult.
That's a timeout, maybe. Does your family lay you off when finances get tight? Like, it's not a family. And if you have nobody else in your life, then that could be a signal that you are giving so much of yourself to this job that you are denying yourself all of these other relationships that you could be having. And really, if you think about how work has evolved over the years, work wasn't always the center of our lives. Work was the family. There were family farms. Like we did work as a family, but there were also, faith-based communities and other groups in the community that would you would hang out with, and you had your friends. Like we used to get community from a lot more places, and those have slowly gone away, and we have put it all on work.
That's a fantastic point because I look at my work environment and all of their friends now, this is a previous company, all their friends now all used to work at that company before I left it. And I remember asking one manager at the time at this previous company, I was like, all your friends work for this company? He's like, yeah, yeah. I changed my friends over the last couple of years. And that's when I was like, what were your hobbies and who were your friends before you started working here? He didn't remember. He eventually married someone that worked there. And I was like, wow, all your friends, your partner, they all work here. If you would ever leave this job, what would happen? And to your point, it seems like we forget who we are when we become this deep into the company. And you're right, there was a time where if it wasn't the family business or the family farm, you had your community and you had your family, which you went home to because the reason why you were at work was to support them. It wasn't to build a family within the job. Why do you think people confuse the two, especially those who say that I don't have anyone else outside of this job? This job is my family. This job is my everything.
Because I think they're getting that need met, you know? I love a work bestie like anybody else does. Some of my coworkers have been my favorite people. You know why? Because you are basically bonded. You're bonded over this shared experience, good or bad. The bad experiences will bond you with people even faster. We love our coworkers. Sometimes that's the only reason we want to show up. And we spend more time with those people than we do with our own families. So the company that I worked for, when I had to leave, part of the reason I did not want to leave was because of my other coworkers. I had been through so much with them. I loved them deeply. We hung out with our families together. Like we got drunk on the weekends together. Like I was I was ingrained with them. And so leaving this job not just meant you need to go find a new job now, but you are losing all your friends.
Do you think
It's
some people
incredibly
suffer?
difficult.
Yeah, do you think some people suffer A feeling of loneliness then?
I think a lot of people are lonely just in general. I think a lot of adults are lonely because adult friendships are hard to come by and they're hard to sustain, in my opinion. And where is the easiest place to meet friends? It's at work. And so when, it's easy for me to say, well, it's a contract, do your 3 years and then go to another job. But there are other things that are tied with that, and friendships are one of them.
Men, as they get older, struggle with that, making friends and maintaining them. Like women are just better at it. But you're right. Like a man that is totally driven to be very successful will probably only have his friends at that job. And to ask him to try to separate might be devastating. You mentioned identity earlier. And I'm just wondering how many people suffer from an identity crisis that goes untreated because they just don't see it in a way that everyone else does. And I know you mentioned that you brought it home. How do you see people being impacted by this unhealthy attachment to their job when it comes to their real life, romantic life?
Yeah, I mean, if you are bringing it home, like I use my example of it, I was not myself. I cried every single day. I would come home in the middle of the day crying, and my husband would be like, "What happened now?" My kids said, "We talk about that a lot." Like it just really, for me, it overtook my whole life because it was deeply, deeply traumatizing to me. So I think sometimes that happens on the lesser extent. What I see a lot is just like, I can't do this I don't know how to leave and I don't know how to stay. And I'm very unhappy, but I feel stuck and I don't know where to go. And my boss is driving me crazy and this work is too much and I'm sick of doing this and my clients are dumb and all of this stuff that you want to talk about. Sometimes I think it's because we're venting so much with our work besties that we really get in the habit of talking about it. And so then when we go home, the other people in our lives that don't work with us, we want them to understand what we're going through because we're really having a hard time. And so we want to talk about it. But most people that don't work with you there's a small threshold for how much people can handle hearing about your job.
It's like teachers and nurses that are always complaining, and people are like, again. But I think to your point, I think that would fall into the high absorption roles, right?
Yes, yes, which is why a coach, a therapist, a career coach, or someone like me, like I do think it's very important to find a safe person to be able to speak to about work if you're struggling in a healthy and productive way that's going to move you forward. Because we vent at work, it feels really good at the time. I'm not sure that's always helpful to us. And then when we try to talk to our families about it, they don't really understand. They can't really, even if they try to be supportive, like they're like, well, get a new job. Like people are just like, well, get a new job. I don't know what to tell you, which may or may not be the answer. And so I do think it is important to have somebody to talk to about like, this is my job and I'm struggling to set boundaries, or I'm struggling to make these changes, or I'm really starting to lose myself here, but I don't know how to get myself out of this.
For the person who's looking to assist, let's say if I take me, I want to assist my wife who's going through a difficult time at her job. But she's mentioning it, and now to the point it's becoming an everyday thing. Like she always and always and always talks about it. What advice would you give to the person who wants to be sympathetic and provide a listening ear, but even they are becoming annoyed or maybe a little bit frustrated with how often it's coming up and how much it dominates their day-to-day interactions?
I would think one, if this person finds that they're getting triggered, like if you're getting triggered because your wife wants to talk about her job so much, then that's something to kind of look inside of you and figure out what's coming up for you. Maybe there's something there. Outside of that, I think the question is, how can I support you? I think a lot of people jump into advice mode. Like I said, so many people told me get a new job. And I was like, you really think I haven't thought about that before? Like, Wow, I never thought about that before. That's really genius. Like you're really helping me out here. And so when they would say stuff like that, it actually did just create more shame and it made me feel judged. And so it made them not be safe. And I was already feeling not safe in my own body. So well-meaning friends that were trying to help me and support me just became unsafe people as well, which just made it worse for me. So don't give unsolicited advice. Don't tell people to quit their job. How can I support you? And if it's a husband and wife, or it's a marriage, or it's, a unit where you're having to make financial decisions together, do we need to have the logistics conversation? If you do need to leave, what does that do to our finances? How much money do you need to make at another job if you did want to leave? Like, I do think that's part of it, but really, how can I support you?
I'm glad you mentioned the support because some people will say that just get another job, beat up your boss, right? Like these are things that you necessarily can't do. Like you dream about it, right? Just somebody give me 5 minutes in the back with the boss and let them feel all the pain that maybe you're feeling on an emotional or mental health level. But I think too often we go to the wrong people for support and for advice. And to your point, if it's a traumatic situation that is triggering you because it's bringing up things from the past, you don't want to necessarily hear, well, get another job as a person is walking back to their life that looks perfect to you, right? Because you're going through a difficult time. How important is it to find the right people and make sure that you're connecting with the right people when you're going through traumatic situations like these?
It's extremely important. And honestly, I think you just need one safe person. Even if it's just one person who your system feels safe around. So not like, intellectually, it's a safe person, but actually puts your system at ease, does not make you feel judged, does not create shame in you, does not give you unsolicited advice, but it can truly just sit with you and hold space for the emotions that you're going through. One person can help you.
There's a few questions that come up. Is it me? What did I do to deserve this? Why do you think start to maybe blame themselves for these situations?
I think people are trying to understand, and they're trying to find a reason. A lot of times what trauma is there's a blind side element I find a lot. Like I did not see this coming. That was what happened to me. I did not see this coming. I did not even know that bosses like this existed. And that's part of it. It's like, well, I thought that I knew how things worked. But if I didn't see this, what else am I not seeing? What else do I not understand? So it can be easier for people to say, oh, I deserve this is karma, or I deserved this, or that's because I said this, to create some sort of understanding of what got them there. Because if there's no reason, if it's not your fault, you may just actually have to admit that the world doesn't operate the way you thought it does. Like it may actually change how you view the world, which is a much scarier concept and certainly scarier to our nervous system than just putting blame on somebody.
So instead of pointing the finger at others who may be impacting them, they'll blame themselves because they think that, in a way, they deserve this treatment.
It could be. I mean, part of that I think comes from, their past experiences and their trauma responses and what they've been conditioned to believe about themselves. What's their go-to? Is that really what I would call a protective behavior? Sometimes it's easier to feel that than to feel what's actually happening. And while I was going through it for that 9 months, I didn't want to admit what was actually happening because that meant that I couldn't work there anymore and I wasn't ready to leave. So I had to search for other reasons. I had to keep like trying to figure it out before I was actually able to radically accept the situation for exactly what it was. And I think that's pretty common in just abusive relationships in general. If you admit that it's abuse, then what are you going to do?
That's a big first step, admitting that.
Yeah. And it's a requirement to healing.
You mentioned earlier vulnerability can be scary for some people. We're asking people to admit that the job or the situation that's providing the lifestyle that they want may not be the ideal fit for them. And then we're asking them to be vulnerable. These are two behaviors that for many people, it's so scary that they will never want to be a part of that. Is that difficult for people to take those first couple of steps, identify there's an issue, identify that maybe they have to do something about it, and then third, find a solution?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you don't feel like you need to do anything about it, then you don't need to do anything about it. Like, I'm not here to ask you to be vulnerable if that's not something that you want to do. Maybe you are happy in your job. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's not impacting you enough. The people that I work with, and probably the people that this is going to resonate with more, are the people that are really to the point where they can't live like this anymore. Like they know something has to change. They don't want to live like this anymore. They just don't know what. That's the step is like admitting that. And what's that saying, like the pain of staying has to outweigh the pain of change, something like that. We're wired to stay with the routine that we know. So we are only going to actually change and do something different if that is more painful than doing the unknown.
Yeah, you have to make a decision. Is it more painful for me to stay or more painful for me to leave? And for a lot of people, the brain, right, our body, we get used to the chaos on the job because, well, it hasn't killed me yet. I've been able to survive it. But if I were to leave, that's unknown. Katie, that's scary. I don't know. What if I don't survive it? Because I've been able to survive this for 10 years. What if that kills me? Well, then you have to make a decision. Which one hurts more? Do you think self-worth plays a value that maybe some people think that they're not worthy of better?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have worthiness wounds. Like somewhere in our childhood, something happened and we interpreted that to mean that we weren't worthy or that we were not good enough exactly as we were, even though we were. And now that's a wound that we carry with us into adulthood. Does that come up and impact how you live your life? Probably, probably.
Yeah, if you have abandonment issues, that's going to be difficult because is it that you're leaving before that they actually leave you, or is it that you're thinking that, well, maybe I'm not worthy of a better job? Maybe, to your earlier point, I deserve this because I'm a bad mother, I'm a bad father. I stepped on ants when I was a kid. Whatever justification you can come up with, you start to maybe validate or justify why you're still there. Is that something that people struggle with where they will find reasons to stay instead of maybe reasons to leave?
Yeah, I mean, everybody looks first for reasons why they can't make a change. Like that's what I hear most from people. I can't make a change because I'm not going to make the same amount of money. I don't know what to do. I've been here for so long. I don't want to start over. They go really to these are the reasons why I can't change versus trying to think about it of like, how could I make this happen? Or what's one step that I need to take to help me figure this out, whatever direction that I want to go into.
Okay, let me ask you one final question before I let you go. I want to give you three wishes for this question. What are three things you wish people knew about life after leaving a toxic job and why?
Hmm. That's a great question. I felt like peace in my chest when you said that. The first thing would be that healing is possible. So when we leave a toxic job, the trauma comes with us. That's the other thing about telling people just to leave and get a new job. Even when I left that job and I got a new job, the first 6 months at my new company were very difficult for me. I was still having a lot of trauma responses. I was still like very physically reactive in my new role. So it comes with you, but you can do healing work to actually heal so that you can, move on from that and have a successful career. So that's one thing, healing is possible. The second thing is understanding your nervous system is the path to freedom. The current state of your nervous system dictates how you think, act, feel, and perceive the world around you. And we're not taught about it. Like, that's bananas. We should be taught that. We should be talking about it. How you perceive, think, act, feel is all based on your nervous system state. So that would be the second thing, is learning about your nervous system states are the key to freedom. And if you go to my website, workisnotfamily.com, I do offer a free guide that breaks down the three primary states of the nervous system and then some somatic practices depending on which state you're in. So that could be a good place to start for that. And then I think the third thing would be healing is going to open up opportunities that you can't even imagine right now. My life keeps getting better and better and better. My marriage is better. My relationship with my children is better.